welcome to this Royal Marines virtual experience. I am Becca Dudley and I've been invited by the Royal Navy to host this evening's show. Today, we're going to be taking a close look at the Royal Marines Commandos, the Royal Navy's own amphibious troops. If you're looking for a chance to do something adventurous and meaningful with your life, learn some new skills, become a leader, experience teamwork like you've never experienced it before, travel the world and realize your full potential, this could be the place for you. If you're the sort of person who's constantly seeking to smash your personal best, challenge yourself mentally and physically, step up, go the extra mile and be a part of one of the most elite forces in the world, then the RM Commandos might just be for you. Today, we're going to be hearing from 3 serving Royal Marines Commandos, Ryan, Josh and Joe, who are going to give us insights into their world. We'll be learning more about the state of mind that we have all seen and heard in the Royal Marines TV adverts and how this can help you earn that prestigious green beret. We'll be hearing about their experiences of training and how they prepared for that even before they joined, what the RM Commandos do on a day-to-day basis, what skills and sports you'll be exposed to, and everything in between. We're going to be drilling right down into the detail of this crack commando force. We'll be talking to Sean later in the show, who's in the Royal Marines Reserve, the part-time voluntary RM branch where members undergo exactly the same training as the RM Commandos and who, once trained, can be deployed in conflict zones or to areas hit by humanitarian crisis anywhere in the world. Now, due to the latest lockdown situation this year, our guests are going to be joining us through the powers of the internet. But just to reassure you, we are recording this in a COVID-secure, socially distanced studio, and we're going to be taking every precaution to keep everybody safe and well. And as we're pre-recording the show today, we won't be doing a live Q&A, but I will be asking our guests tons of questions. And if you have anything that you want answered, we've got a whole team of Royal Marines Commandos ready and waiting to answer any and all of your questions throughout the show and after. So you can speak directly with them by clicking the button below. And if you like what you see, you can start your journey today by expressing an interest on the RM website. Now, this doesn't commit you in any way, but it does give you the chance to arrange a chat with a Royal Marines advisor to find out more. So don't be shy. And remember, get involved and chat to the team at any point. If you have any questions, just click the chat button on your screen. So first, let's get Ryan online to tell us a little bit more about the Royal Marines. Hey Ryan, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
Good, yeah, I'm great. So first of all, can you tell us when you joined the Marines and what inspired you to join in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, sort of in the early stages, my initial interest was sparked through watching a show at the time called Commando on the Front Line, with which a guy sort of did Royal Marine training and then deployed to Afghanistan alongside Royal Marines on the ground. And that was sort of the first time that when I was watching that whilst I was at school with my dad, I started thinking this is something that I would be pretty interested in and would suit me quite well. I was doing a lot of climbing and mountaineering and things like that at the time. So I just sort of thought it was something that would spark, well, something that would be good for me to do. And then sort of when I was getting to the age where it was possible for me to join, sort of 16, 17, I ended up becoming really friendly with a guy from the gym who's now my best friend, and he was an ex-Royal Marine at the time. So, you know, obviously then that was sort of what carried it on and then what sort of convinced me long-term to actually join and go through with joining the Royal Marines.
And how did it compare to the TV show that you watched?
Yeah, to be fair, it was pretty accurate, the TV show. It was showed you everything from the very basics of joining when you're in foundation, the first couple of weeks, through to what you can obviously expect to get up to whilst on operations and deployed around the world. So yeah, it was pretty accurate actually. And I know for sort of my generation, my era, a lot of the guys I know and obviously work with joined for that very reason as well. So yeah, it was pretty positive, I suppose.
So what is your role now and how did you get to where you are? I'd love to hear about your journey in.
Yeah, so my current role is officially the officer commanding the commando recruitment team. So in a sort of normal year, COVID aside, you'd see us travelling around the UK, conducting stadium abseils, zip lining into stadiums, doing match ball deliveries, doing the unarmed combat display, which some viewers might have seen, and also running bespoke recruitment events such as the Royal Marine Experience, which is kind of what this would be, obviously, if we weren't in the middle of lockdown, to get everybody that's got an application in or thinking about applying, give them a sort of raw experience of the Royal Marines, get them out on the boats, do some PT with them, things like that. But then obviously to get to this sort of stage where I am now, obviously joined in 2014, went through Royal Marine Young Officer training, and then passed out and headed straight to 4-3 Commando in Scotland, where I was a troop commander of a specialist troop known as the Recapture Tactics Troop. And we were responsible for essentially having 24/7, 365 days a year security of the UK's strategic nuclear deterrent, and essentially the clue's in the title, Recapture Tactics. So if obviously anything ever went wrong with those, that was sort of our role to get them back. I did 2 years as a troop commander up there, which I was really lucky to do. Most people only get 12 months. So I managed to get 2 years doing that. Worked very closely with the US Marines during that time as well, because they've obviously got a similar team that we have. And then sort of did a Company 2IC/training officer role for around about 6 months, running overseas live fire training, things like that, before then joining the Department of the Corps Colonel, which is obviously where I currently work in this role.
Okay, and we're going to hear a little bit more from you later on about your training experience. But would you be able to give us a brief history of the Royal Marines Commandos and how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So very brief history. Some people probably know a lot more than this already, but the Royal Marines were officially formed on the 28th of October 1664, something that we celebrate every single year on the Corps birthday. So it's going to be 357 years this year. It was originally known as the Duke of York and Albany's Maritime Regiment of Foot, whose sort of main roles were protecting ships and the ship's officers at the time, as well as sort of boarding enemy vessels when they came very close in, obviously back in sort of 1700s. Obviously, moving a few hundred years forward, the Royal Marines played a huge part in World War I, conducting amphibious landings at sites such as Gallipoli and Zeebrugge, and obviously also defending Antwerp. So again, a huge history before then as well, but just briefly going over it. And then sort of heading into World War II, the infantry battalions of the Royal Marines were essentially reorganised as commando units, and then commandos were officially developed during that time after the Prime Minister at the time, Winston Churchill, requested specially trained troops of the Hunter class who can develop a reign of terror down these enemy coasts. So they were sort of his exact lines to his commanders when he wanted the commandos forming. And then obviously we were formed to disrupt and destroy enemy defences along the coast of France and obviously the rest of Europe through commando raids, which essentially then sort of make way for mainstream forces and everything else. And then obviously moving from World War II forwards, we've got other campaigns, Falklands, and then obviously all the way up to sort of Afghanistan and Iraq in the early 2000s.
It's so interesting. And for anybody who doesn't know, what role does the Royal Marines play in protecting the UK today?
Yeah, so I suppose at the minute we're sort of, obviously we're part of the Royal Navy, so we work alongside the Navy conducting sort of counter-piracy, counter-narcotic raids in the Caribbean and around the Gulf. That's one of the sort of tasks. We are also the UK's Arctic and jungle and obviously cold weather warfare specialist as well, to provide, for that sort of Arctic region, which most people don't realise how much of the actual planet it takes over. So we're the UK's specialists in that area as well. And obviously being part of the Royal Navy and being commandos, we're amphibious trained as well, which is a key entry to theatre through maritime or air assets in what we call the littoral space, which is essentially all the areas around the world that are close to the sea. As you can imagine, the majority of the world's population live in the littoral, as we call it. So that's the role that we play at the minute for the UK.
Okay. And for you, what would you say is the best part of being a Royal Marine?
On a personal level, I would probably say the camaraderie and morale is certainly the the part that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I do, and probably the thing that's the biggest pull factor for me sort of remaining in the Royal Marines. But also the sort of feeling of proudness I get for being such a part of a special organisation. Obviously, you can see our history spans back over 350 years, and just to be a part of the Royal Marines is something special, let alone to actually sort of lead Royal Marines on combat operations. So yeah, for me, they're the main best bits.
For sure. All right, well listen, Ryan, you're going to join us a little bit later on for some more questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We'll come back to you a bit later on for more. And for now, that is really interesting context to understand before we meet the rest of the team. And don't forget, you can get involved in the chat and talk to an RM Commando right now. And now we're going to be chatting to Joe, who's been a Marine for 11 years. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hello there.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good. So listen, we know that to be a Marine, you have to undergo some pretty hardcore training. How do you even begin to prepare yourself for that training before you join?
To be honest, it's not as complicated as a lot of people seem to think, especially in the early days. We seem to get deified quite a lot with our physical regime. But before starting recruit training, all you need to really do is focus on your virtual pre-joining fitness test, and then the Royal Marines fitness assessment. So where you're doing your pull-ups, press-ups, sit-ups, and the bleep test. Once you get into recruit training, it's all handled by the PTIs. They will get you exactly where you need to be. It's literally just a matter of turning up on the day and giving your best effort.
Okay, and how long does that initial training last for? How long do you do it for?
The initial training is 32 weeks, so about 8 months.
Wow, that's a long time. And for training every single day?
Yeah, literally every single day. I mean, as you progress through, you get odd days off. When you get to the latter stages, I think you get every Sunday off. But for the most part, you're doing something every day.
So what for you was the toughest part of that training?
For me personally, it's the classroom-based stuff, all the way down to navigational theory. I find it quite challenging. I'm quite a practical person, as is most people that join the Marines. Getting yourself in that headspace of education again is quite difficult.
So the tagline that we've seen so much is that it's a state of mind, right? What does that mean to you, and how do people know if they have that state of mind?
To me, this is a really good one, and I find that statement really, really pertinent. To me personally, it means, can you operate at your best when everything has gone completely wrong? I mean, we're really world renowned as a fighting force, that we do our best work when everything has gone completely wrong. It's really, really about mental resilience, and you're only really going to know that when you're in a situation where everything is down.
Yeah, and you can really put to the test pushing through the tough times.
That's it, yeah.
So what is the core role of the Royal Marines for anybody who doesn't actually know?
The core role for the Marines, as in our title, is commandos. So we're essentially war fighters. We were founded and created in World War II, and we were brought together to get behind enemy lines, take out high-value targets, and disrupt the enemy's logistical supply. And that's something that we really do hold to this day. As we start to push towards the future commando force, it's something that we're really getting back to the roots of. And we used a lot of it on operations in Afghanistan, where we were doing strike operations against enemy locations.
Okay, and what sort of deployments will people expect to be sent off on?
There's quite a wide variety of deployments, to be honest. You can go on combat operations, like I just mentioned, to Afghanistan. There was Northern Ireland, and going all the way back to the Falklands. We do maritime deployments where you'll be protecting UK shipping or anti-piracy, all the way to training exercises where you go out to America and work with the United States Marines.
Okay. And what's your specific role in the Royal Marines? What do you do?
My trade specialisation is vehicle mechanic. So much like a civilian mechanic, just working on our military platforms. Okay.
And day to day, what does your day look like? Like, give me a typical Monday for you.
So sort of average Monday for me, outside of the recruitment cell and outside of COVID, we'd turn up Monday morning about 08:30. We'd have a parade under the Sergeant Major where he'd inspect your uniform and just make sure everyone's there and okay. We'd go into a bit of physical exercise with the rest of the company. And then, as I said, as a mechanic, I would go into our garages to make sure all our vehicle platforms are fit, ready to go out the door to support the lads on their training exercises. Once you finish work, me personally would go into my own sort of physical training period. And then after that, it's just down to you to unwind however you do that best, which for me is sitting on the Xbox.
Love that. What are you playing on the Xbox?
At the moment, I'm on Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Of course you are. Brilliant. So how much downtime, speaking of, do you actually get? How many days off do you get? Do you get much time to see your loved ones and your relatives?
Once you're out of recruit training, you get quite a bit of downtime. For the most part, it's quite like normal life. You work 8:30 until 16:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Outside of that, you can spend time with your friends. If you're on the accommodation on the base, then it'll be with the lads that you work with. For anyone that lives at home with their family, then they're off during the weekdays to be at home. And weekends, you pretty much get off for the most part. The only time that you don't really is when you're on exercise.
I see. So do you feel like being in the Marines impacts your personal life at all, or not really?
It can have an effect on your personal life. For the most part, for single lads, it doesn't really have a great deal of impact because they'll spend most of their time on camp with the friends that they make in the Corps. For me personally, I'm in a quite committed relationship with a kid involved, so it does have a bit of an impact, especially when you deploy away. It can get to a point where it feels like you're dipping in and out of their lives, but unfortunately, it's just part and parcel of the job, and you just got to find ways to make it work. Which, fortunately, she's quite mentally resilient as well, and she can deal with it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's lots of other plus sides to the job that make it worthwhile, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of the places you go away to, you get periods of downtime, and the Corps are quite welcoming with bringing your partners out to the places that you're deployed to at the time. So you can get periods of a week, 2 weeks where you can bring your family out with you.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, and also, is there an upper age limit for joining?
Yeah, so the upper age limit currently is 32 when you start recruit training.
Right, and you can be, is it 16 to join?
Yeah, the lower limit is 16 at the time of joining.
All right, nice. So would you say that being a Marine helps build you not only physically but mentally? Like how has it built your character?
Oh yeah, it definitely builds you mentally. And the physical training that you do in recruit training goes a million miles to building your mental robustness and mental toughness. And that's specifically what's there for, because when you go away on deployments, you're really, really going to need to be able to dig deep. I mean, you'll have times where you're literally at the bottom of the barrel, running on barely any sleep, barely any food, and you just don't know where you're going to be able to get the energy from to carry on. But you really, really do. And it goes back to that saying, it's a state of mind.
Yeah, and once you push through that, you can push through anything, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And finally, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Ideally, in 5 years' time, I'm still definitely going to be in the Corps, but I'm currently trying to build towards becoming a physical training instructor myself. So hopefully get into that trade and throw in a couple of promotions would be ideal.
Nice, love that. Well, listen, thank you so much for chatting to us and good luck.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Really great to hear from you. And it does sound like a career with some amazing opportunities. Now, don't forget, if you have any questions for the team about how you can progress your interest in becoming part of the most elite force in the world, click the button below now and get involved in the chat. They are ready and waiting for you to get in touch. And let's take a look at the Royal Marines in action now. Wow, that is not for the faint-hearted, is it? You have to be pretty tough to tolerate those extreme conditions. Okay, so Josh is joining us now, so let's say hi. Hello, Josh. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. So you are part of a Royal Marine family, right?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, my dad was a Royal Marine. My brother is a Royal Marine, currently serving. He's based at 42 Commando. Both of them were anti-tank specialists. So I'm kind of the outcast of the family now, I think, because I'm not an anti-tank specialist. But yeah, come from a family of Royal Marines. Very strange environment when I go home. A lot of memorabilia on the walls and stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. But so good because you have so many stories from them to hear about and get you through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially when it came to obviously joining the Marines in the first place. We obviously had those stories, those background stories from our dad, for me to obviously join up on.
Yeah, wicked. So what was your journey like into joining the Marines, and when did you join? How long have you been in the Marines for?
Okay, so I left school in 2013, and I immediately started along the path that everyone else that was my age and my year group at school were doing, which was joining university. I went to university for a year and very quickly found out that wasn't the right place for me. I didn't fit in. Further education wasn't really for me. I liked being outdoors. I liked getting involved with sports and stuff like that. So after a year of being at university, I made the decision to leave university. I drove home and got home, dropped my bags on the floor, and then suddenly stood there and thought, what am I going to do next? You know, where am I going to go next? Because I've got no job. You know, I haven't got a degree or anything like that. So my dad obviously at that point literally said to me, you've got a week to make your mind up. You know, you can either join the forces or get a trade or do whatever you want. And previously at university, I'd already been watching videos of different things, different military branches that I wanted to join. And I'd pretty much made up my mind that the Marines was where I wanted to go. So that was essentially my journey into joining the Marines. I found myself after leaving university about 3 months later, I was down at Lympstone in Devon, starting that process of going through training.
And how was training for you? What kind of things do you go through for anybody who's watching that might be interested but a little scared at the same time? Can you tell us some of the practices that you have to do?
Yeah, so the training, obviously, most people know it's 32 weeks long. It's one of the longest and most arduous physical training programs in the world, military training programs in the world. The reason that it is that long and the reason that we spend that much time in training is because once we finish that process and we've passed out after 32 weeks, we're ready to deploy anywhere in the world. We're literally good to go out the door straight away. And you know, in the days of Afghanistan, guys were finishing training after 32 weeks, jumping on an airplane and flying straight to Afghanistan, ready to go to war. And no other military branch does that. So you start off in training and they strip you back as a person to the bare basics. You know, they teach you to wash, shave, iron your clothes, change your bed sheets, everything, all those sort of basic discipline as a human. They pretty much teach you. From there, you'll start to build on your physical fitness. In the first sort of 10 weeks of training, you build up your physical fitness in the gym, in a environment which we call IMF, which stands for Intermediate Military Fitness, I think. That's mostly in the gym down at Lympstone. You'll learn to climb ropes, do your press ups and stuff like that. And but after those 10 weeks, I think that's probably the fittest I've ever been in my life. You really do get fit in those 10 weeks. From there, you will start to continue through training. Obviously, through those 10 weeks as well, you do another military style things. You learn how to use your weapon, clean your weapon, take it apart, put it together, and the very bare basics of soldiering. From there, the sort of phase 2 of training, or the second phase, what you'll do is you'll move into sort of the more military aspect of being a soldier. You'll learn troop tactics and our sort of our tactics on the ground, the things that we use, the equipment that we use, and you'll learn to fight and navigate in the daytime, at night time, and you'll continue obviously that fitness as well all the way through the second phase. That will then bring you out into the commando phase of training, which is essentially your final stage of training then, where you will continue more fitness, but your fitness now will move on to what we call here the bottom field, which is pure military-based fitness. It's still climbing ropes, but going over the obstacle course, the assault course, fireman's carries, battlefield style of fitness, building up your strength, ready for things like casualty evacuations on the battlefield, and stuff like that. You'll have throughout the 32 weeks, every so often you'll have exercises. These exercises are normally a teach / you'll be getting tested at the same time, your skills in the field. When you're in the field, you can be there from anywhere between 3 days to 2 weeks at a time, living out of your bergen, your sleeping bag and your poncho, cooking your own food in the field. Everything is tactical at that stage. So it's quite a tough course, but it's good. And by the end of it, you definitely know your job. You definitely know your sort of craft.
Yeah, you're fully prepared. So what for you was the toughest part of training? What was like the biggest challenges that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I had to overcome, I think, was the only way I can really describe it is describing training as a conveyor belt. So we break training down into weeks, and it's like you sort of join on the end of the conveyor belt, and week by week you move along it. I got to about week 14, something like that, and I got an injury in my knee. And what I had to do with my troop was I had to step out of my troop, rehabilitate for 4 months while they were continuing on that process. I had to watch them pass out and get their green berets and stuff. And then I stepped back onto that conveyor belt to continue my training, essentially. And I think that was the hardest part for me, was having to step away from my friends, my troop, watch them continue their training process, and then step back in and reintegrate with a new troop and a new group of guys to finish that process off. Yeah.
Right. And if you don't, I mean, do many people not get through that training? Does anybody like fail it? Is that a thing? And if so, do you get a second shot?
Yeah, so obviously, there's a big thing, a big sort of awareness in the Marines that the pass rate is very, very small. But all I can sort of say on that is it's a lot. My troop, when I started training, we started with 54, and I think about 14 of us passed out at the end of that 32-week period. But I would say 99% of the guys that didn't make it through, of those remaining, I can't do the maths, but 54 minus 14, it was self-inflicted. They chose to leave. They couldn't hack the mental aspect of it, and they decided to leave training of their own accord. It's very mentally difficult, like I was saying, on that conveyor belt process to deal with all these different things that are going on in training, and continue to be mentally robust throughout training. What happens is, if you fail an exercise or you struggle in a certain area or an aspect, what will happen is, just like that conveyor belt, if you get injured, you step off. Again, you'll step off, but what you'll do, rather than rehabilitating an injury, is you'll relearn that certain area that you were struggling with. You'll have a little bit of time to slow down and take in what you need to learn, and then you'll step back in again with another troop. And that when you step off, that's what we call stepping into hunter company. You'll move into a different company and you'll learn the area that you're not quite familiar with, and then you'll step back in and continue that process again.
Got you. And what's your specific role? What are you doing day to day? Tell us about what you do.
So my day-to-day role as a Commando Duties Marine is, so everyone that passes out of Lympston after the 32 weeks, what will happen is everyone passes out of Lympston as a Commando Duties Marine. You don't specialise while you're in training like certain aspects of the Army, I think, do. We're a soldier first. As a Royal Marine, you're a soldier first. So you pass out as a Commando Duties Marine. What that means is you're essentially a frontline troop. You specialise in all areas of soldiering. You have a basic knowledge of most specialisations. That you have a very basic knowledge of them. What will happen then is, once you've got into the wider Royal Marines, you've got your green beret, you've moved off to your commando unit, and you're settled in that commando unit. What you'll do is you'll decide what specialisation you want to go into, and then you'll choose that specialisation from there.
Okay. And for anybody, I'm imagining that you probably have to tell quite a lot of people what you do, and they have a bunch of questions for you. But what do you get asked the most when you say that you're a Marine?
It's quite a funny one actually. When you say that you're a Marine, normally you'll be having a conversation with someone, and it's quite a proud. There's a lot of pride that comes with it, and I do quite like saying I'm a Marine. It always gets 100%, always gets a good sort of feedback from it. And normally when you say to someone that you're a Royal Marine, they sort of, it's almost shock almost every time. It's sort of like, oh, okay. They almost take a step back, and then you instantly get this kind of respect from people, and they've always got questions, and they're always asking what you do. And yeah, everyone's always really intrigued, but everyone's always really impressed. And as you can probably imagine, it does always go down well on a night out, but I'll let your imagination run wild with that.
And so how long do you have to sign up for? Is it a set amount of time? Do people sign up for different lengths?
Yeah, the contracts differ. I had a conversation with my guys earlier just to find out where everyone was with their contracts and stuff. I know that I signed on to a 12-year contract, of which I only have to serve 4 years. So after that 4-year period, I can leave of my own accord. I can put in my chit, as we say, but in sort of the civilian world, you'd say hand in your notice, and then you'll serve your remaining time, and then that's you ready to leave then.
Okay. And you're staying in accommodation right now, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's that like for anybody who's wondering? And how often are you there? Who's there with you? Give us the lowdown. So
as a trained rank, as we call it, so as a passed out Marine with a green beret, the accommodation is obviously very different from that to a recruit. My accommodation at the moment is particularly good. I've got, like a double bed en suite kind of little room, really good, loads of storage space, Wi-Fi, plenty of place for your TV, your sort of home comforts, and you do really make that little area your home. I'm what you would call a camp orphan, or what we call a camp orphan. I don't have my own house yet. I'm in the process of working through that. So all of my stuff, all of my belongings is in that room, my guitar amp, and all these like kind of little things. And but there's plenty of space for it all, and you can really make it quite comfy over time, especially, yeah.
Okay, and then on the flip side, what is the accommodation like when you're out on operations?
So on operations, or it's a difficult one to answer because it differs every single time. Every situation and country and environment that you work in, everything is difficult. It's different. Sorry. A lot of the time, if, as an example, when I went to the United States and I worked out there, we would stay in the United States Marine Corps facilities. We'd use their camp as our base, and then we'd work out of there. And that's the same in most areas that we go to for a large scale, long-term exercise. If we're doing, say, a short-term exercise, let's say 3 weeks on Dartmoor, we won't necessarily have a camp to work out of. We will literally be out of our bergens under a poncho, cooking our ration packs in the field, kind of a lot more green, a lot more sort of, in the field. Yeah.
Okay. And do the Marines offer like financial help, things like bursaries? Yeah,
so there is so many financial benefits to being in the Royal Marines. The list is quite literally endless. I mean, the ones that I always go to: dental care, medical care, physios, the top 3 main ones. They're obviously all free on the Royal Marines.
And you can undertake additional learning qualifications if you want as well, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I left university and obviously didn't get that degree that I did originally sign up for. Over time, with a bit of age and experience behind me, sometimes I do think, would I like to go down the sort of open university route, or get that degree that I didn't quite finish, and scratch that itch. Essentially, I could do that, and it will be subsidised by the Royal Marines in certain situations, especially if you're leaving the Royal Marines or you're looking to leave. They have a little thing called the resettlement program, and what that'll do is just set you up for civilian life and leaving the Royal Marines ready for that next step. And what part of that is, you build up credits over the years. The longer you serve and stuff like that, you build up, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like credits, and the more you've earned, the more you can spend essentially on resettlement. I do know guys that have done courses in things like computer programming and technical stuff like that I don't really understand. But yeah, there's definitely plenty to do. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, they cover a lot. And I think people will also be really interested to hear about the travel side of things and also adventurous training. Have you been involved in that yet?
Yeah, so there's plenty of opportunities to travel, especially on my first year of passing out of the Royal Marines. I was drafted to a unit called 4-5 Commando. I was integrated into a company called Zulu Company. And in that year period, I flew to 8 different countries and worked out of 8 different countries. And that's been the same throughout my career, year on year. I've not had quite that many each year, but there are always travel opportunities. I think I've been to in the region of 12 to 14 different countries, maybe more, but off the top of my head, 12 to 14 countries over my 5 years in the Royal Marines. And adventure training, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So adventure training is essentially when you go abroad, or not necessarily abroad, but you do sort of training where very relaxed, very not in uniform, in your civilian clothing. And the idea is a bit of downtime, bring the guys together, get the guys working well together and reintegrate everyone, iron out any sort of discrepancies people might have with each other. And it's a chance for the guys to let off steam. Over the years, I've done things like I went to St. Anton in Austria, went skiing for a week out there. I went to Benidorm, climbing for a week. We spent a week in Benidorm in the sun climbing. That was really good. I know guys have gone to the United States and they've done free fall skydiving and things like that. There's loads of opportunities and loads of places that you can go to do adventure training. Yeah.
So without being too biased, why would you recommend joining the Royal Marines as opposed to other armed forces like the RAF or the military?
It depends what you're looking for out of your time in the Marines. I mean, when I joined, one of the main things for me was being a soldier. I love the idea of being a soldier on the ground, doing that kind of work, and the ability to pass out of training and be ready for operations without any further training, that for me was a big thing. The fact that the Royal Marines is self-sufficient as well. So in the Army or the RAF, when you a lot of the time you can end up as a driver or a chef or something like that, one of those branches for your entire military career, and there's no way out of that. That's the Royal Corps of Signals. You are a signaller for the entire time that you are in the Army. Whereas in the Marines, you have that ability to fluctuate and jump and change between your jobs that you do and vary what you do. The other thing is the pride aspect of it. Going back to what we were saying about when people ask me or what people think when they ask me when I'm in the Marines, that pride of being able to say that I'm a Royal Marines Commando and I'm part of the Royal Marines family. That's a big thing for me as well. That's part of why I love what I do. So yeah.
And finally, what advice would you give to your younger self when you first joined the Marines?
I think to prepare properly, give yourself the best chance to achieve that goal of earning the Green Beret. You've got to really prepare before you've even arrived at Lympstone. Before you've even stepped off of the train onto the platform, you've got to give yourself the best opportunity that you can. Preparing in fitness, robustness. The main thing for me, obviously, that I lapped on was coming into Lympstone robust. Maybe a bit more strength and conditioning training I could have used, or and definitely I think there's plenty of stuff out there on the internet of how to prepare and little tips and tricks on little things that you can do when you're at Lympstone that will really help you. So I think definitely scan the internet, find out every little piece of information that you can, and just fill your head with as much knowledge as you can, as well as obviously the fitness and robustness side of it as well, before you've even arrived at Lympstone, I think would be my advice.
Yeah, preparation is key. I love that. Well, listen, thank you so much. It's been super interesting hearing your story, and thank you for sharing. We appreciate it.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Nice one. Well, thank you so much, Josh. It was so interesting to hear your experience as a Royal Marine Commando. Okay, let's get Sean in the room so he can tell us all about his role in the Royal Marines Reserve. So hello, Sean. How you doing?
Not too bad, Becca. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. So you are an ex-regular, right? Can you tell us a little bit about why you joined initially and then why you decided to move to the reserves?
Yeah, I think my grandfather was in the military, so from a young age, I think I was probably 15 or 16, I decided it was something I wanted to do. A little story I like to tell, I joined the cadets when I was young, and I was up at a cadet camp when I was about 18, and somebody asked me what I was going to do with my life, and I said I was going to join the army. And the guy was a Royal Marine who was helping train us on survival, and he said to me, if you don't at least try for the Royal Marines, you will regret it for your entire military career. So the next year when I was 19, I applied, and then I was lucky enough to be sponsored through uni and then joined straight after uni. So yeah, that's my little anecdote. I loved fitness, I loved training, so it seemed sensible to try the one that was going to be the most difficult and required those sorts of levels. In terms of leaving and going to the reserves, I didn't join the reserves immediately. I actually went out to have a bit of a civilian career. The way I describe it is I might love chocolate ice cream, but if I've never tried vanilla and strawberry, I'm not going to know how good they could be. So for me, I wanted to try something else and see, test my hand at other things. I did feel something was lacking in my life, and I'm not afraid to admit I got a little bit depressed. And once I joined the reserves, I got back what was missing. I think probably people in the military can be relatively institutionalized, the camaraderie, the banter, and just doing something that made you who you are. Being a Royal Marine is very much part of who I am. So that was really important for me, and that's one of the reasons I did it.
Nice. And you are self-employed, aren't you? And I know you're studying as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to now and how you're managing to balance that with the reserves?
Yeah, so I'm self-employed. I was employed for a couple of years when I first left. I managed a gym in London, and then I went to set up my own businesses. So I run an online fitness business which helps people with general fitness and health, but also to get into the military, in particular the Royal Marines. And I've consulted on health and fitness for hotels, big companies and that sort of thing. And I've also worked in media. I own a little production company, so fingers in pies. And I decided to do something I always wanted to do, which is to do a master's in psychology. So I'm currently a full-time student. And the reserves has been great with all of this because it gives me that hand into the military, which I love, and I love being part of it. But also, it's a really good way to earn money. I say to people, it's the best part-time job I could have while being a student. So, it works in a number of ways for my life and the way I live it.
Love it. And obviously, you like to stay on top of your fitness. So, I mean, are the fitness requirements the same if people wanted to join the Marine Reserves? Is that the same as the full-time Marine training?
Yeah, so the fitness requirements are exactly the same. In fact, the first test that people do, which is a virtual fitness test, doesn't matter if you're a regular or reserve recruit, you'll go through the same test. The fitness test within training for a reserve recruit or a regular recruit, they match. The only difference is a regular will be there week in, week out with the CTC with their instructors. Reserves get some time with their instructors, but then they do have to manage their own time as well. And then the commando tests and the tests to qualify to be able to do the commando tests are all exactly the same. So the fitness requirements, they're up there, but it's not unachievable for anybody who's willing to put the time and effort in.
Okay. Any advice for people who are worrying about that fitness side?
The best advice is that we're not looking for the finished article. We will help you get there. But equally, you have to be willing to put the time and effort in. The best piece of advice I can give, and where people often go wrong, is they just follow random sessions here and there, thinking that will get them from A to B. The best way to get from A to B is to have a program that's progressive, that says, this is the end point I need to get to, this is where I am now, and this is how I get there. And that's my background in the physical training branch of the Royal Marines has taught me that. And as I say, my civilian business, that's how I base it, that you want to get from A to B, whether that's losing body fat, whether that's joining the Royal Marines, you need that program to follow.
And would you mobilise in the same way as a regular if you're a reserve?
Yeah, so mobilisation can work in a number of ways. What a lot of guys do after they get their Green Beret in the first couple of years, they mobilise for a year with one of the commando units. So one of the guys that's at my detachment at the moment, he's with 4-2 Commando for a year. So he goes there, and whatever they're doing for their operations or their work, he does that. And then he can choose to stay on for another year or go to a different unit or come back to being reserve. They're also what we call short-term training teams, STTs. So I got asked to do one last year in Africa, the year before in the Philippines. Unfortunately, for no fault of my own, neither of those happened. But you can volunteer for those. And then when there are major operations like we've seen in the past with Afghanistan, reserves can mobilise for that 6-month tour, go and do that with the regulars and then come back. So there are a number of options, and depends on what you want to do, and how it works with your civilian life and what your overall goals are, I guess.
Nice. So you mentioned earlier that you were feeling quite low before you joined the reserves, and that it really helped you to get out of that. What other benefits did you find that really helped you out, things that really stood out to you whilst being in the reserves?
I think that the biggest one for me with the reserves was the reconnection with the Corps, because it was such a big part of my life, and for any Royal Marine it would be. Also, the Corps and the reserves in particular allows you to do a lot of the courses and things that you could do within the regulars. So doing those courses helps with communication skills, management skills, leadership skills. And I think for anybody joining the reserves, that's something to consider. It doesn't matter what your civilian career is, being in the reserves can help you grow your abilities in other areas. Obviously, there's also, that we've spoken about the fitness and that side of things, which has always been a big part of my life. So it's a good reason to keep fit and stay fit. And my first year in the reserves, our 2-week training camp was in Cyprus. So there's travel as well. I get to travel with my civilian career, but some of the places you'd obviously go with the Royal Marines and with people that are like-minded. That's a big draw as well.
Yeah, nice. So do you still feel like it was a really good move for you to take some time out and then go back to being a reserve? Are you glad that you did that? Would you do it again if you had to do it all over?
It's a good question. I think with any life choice, you're never going to know what the other path was. And it's human nature to kind of look at the grass is always greener, I think is the way we describe it. So, of course, there have been times where I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I look at friends I went through training with and where their careers have taken them. But then equally, I look at my civilian career and I've done things. If you'd have asked me as a schoolboy if I would have done those things, I wouldn't have thought so. I've published 5-6 books. I've been able to travel to Israel and Lebanon, these places, with my civilian career. So, but both would have been great. I chose one, and that's what I did. I am really pleased that I dipped my toe back in with the reserves. It's allowed me to reconnect with friends, and again, just make my life more holistic, because I think as somebody who joined the military straight out of university, that was missing, and it's allowed me to go on courses and meet new people. I went on a course 2 years ago and met an American soldier who was on that course, and we've stayed friends, and another guy who's an army officer and stayed friends. So that side of it, I think, is a really healthy balance, and certainly works for my lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that. And finally, do you have any advice for anybody who's watching at home, they're arming and R-ing, they don't know if they should join or not? What would you say to them?
If you've got, I always call it an itch you want to scratch. If you're interested, you probably want to do it. I've spoken to so many people who've got past the age limit of 32 and then, I wish I'd done it. I just, didn't have the confidence. If other people have done it before you, you can do it. And it's much, much better to have a go and then know either way than to leave it too late and then you never get the chance. So if you're interested, just give it a go. What's the worst that can happen?
Love that. Sean, you've been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Amazing. Well, listen, thank you so much for telling us all about the RMR. And now we're going to get Ryan back on the call so he can give us a little bit more information about the Marines. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you.
Hello. So from speaking to you earlier and speaking to the other members of your team, it seems like it's an incredibly rich and really intense experience. What for you are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face, and also how did you overcome them?
Challenge-wise, I would suggest it's just sort of, for me, the most challenging thing was when I sort of first joined Royal Marine training. Obviously quite young in comparison to my peers at the time, joining as an officer. And the term shock of capture was definitely something something I experienced when I joined. For the first week or so, I kind of didn't know what was going on or which way was up. Had no previous military background, didn't really know anybody in the military apart from my friend, but I'll be honest, didn't give me much help sort of preparing for it. So yeah, just sort of turned up and cuffed it, as we would say now. And that for me was the most challenging part, just getting to grips with sort of what was going on and the fact that the saying they sort of break you down as a person and build you back up as a Royal Marine was certainly something that happened to me.
So you just pushed through it, and that's how you got through it. You just
just sort of kept with it. Decided that, you know, the biggest piece of advice I would say now is that you need to realise that training is designed to get you to the end product as a Marine. Realise that the first few weeks of training is not what your job is going to be like once you actually pass out of training. That's just there to get you to that level. So just to realise that the benefits at the end are absolutely worth the effort and the work at the time.
So as a Marine, what sort of operations can you expect to get involved in?
There's a vast array of things that you can get involved with. Anything from MIOPS, which is maritime interdiction operations, where you conduct underway boardings of different vessels, obviously working alongside the Royal Navy, to working, as I mentioned earlier, in the jungle or in the Arctic, or as well as, you know, campaigning as people may remember from the sort of the early 2000s with Afghanistan and Iraq. There's a huge array of operations that the Royal Marines sort of get involved with and get employed on, just due to our versatility, and obviously because we're so highly trained, and we've got a number of specialists in the Royal Marines in different areas. We're just mega employable. So certainly something that the MOD try and employ as much as possible where necessary.
So do the Royal Marines have their own standards? And if so, what are they? What do they mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course we do. I mean, they're very important to us. So we have sort of two elements of it that I always sort of explain to people when we're at events across the country. We have commando spirit and commando values. Commando spirit, the sort of attributes of that are excellence, integrity, self-discipline, and humility. So sort of what do they mean? Well, excellence, obviously it's pretty simple to work out. Strive to do better. Absolutely do your best at everything you can do. Integrity, tell the truth, be honest. Self-discipline, resist the easy option. It's so easy sometimes to just sort of take the easy route and the path of least resistance, but we pride ourselves on making sure we do things right instead of taking that route. And humility, which is just sort of having respect for the rights, diversity, and values of others. The other elements are the commando values, and they are courage, determination, unselfishness, and cheerfulness in the face of adversity. So again, courage, get out in front and do what is right. Clearly, people think being in the Royal Marines, you need courage to, you know, in a combat scenario, but just in day-to-day life and having that ability to stand up for yourself and stand up for others. Determination, quite straightforward, never give up. Obviously, if you do give up, you're probably not going to make it through Royal Marine training. So that's a must. Unselfishness. We also have another saying in the Royal Marines, we put our oppo first, our opposite, which is the man or woman at the side of us. They come first, the rest of the team comes second, and then we put ourselves last, obviously whilst taking care of all our kit and equipment in amongst those. And then the final one, which is probably my favourite, is cheerfulness in the face of adversity. You know, make humour the heart of morale. It's often been commented on when journalists were working with Royal Marines in Afghanistan and places like that they were amazed at how fast Royal Marines could go from engaged in a sort of pretty serious conflict and firefight, then back to sort of making jokes, but then obviously as soon as it's required, snap back into that professional fighting force that we are. So yeah, that's the commando spirit and values, which, like I say, you will employ sort of through every day of life in the Royal Marines.
Yeah, I love that. So what would you say are the most common misconceptions about Royal Marines?
Obviously, I've sort of worked in a sort of recruitment-based role for the last couple of years now. And the biggest thing that I realise when we're out and about is that people just think we are a regiment within the army, and they don't realise that we are in fact part of the Royal Navy. And for us, that's obviously mega important because it provides us that high level ability and gives us opportunities to be employed in a very different way. So yeah, that's one thing I would suggest that people don't fully understand is we are part of the Royal Navy, and we are obviously sort of the Royal Navy's elite amphibious fighting force.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the future commando force?
Yeah, so the Future Commando Force, most people watching might have seen it online over the last sort of few months, last year or so. So essentially, it's designed to modernise the way in which we operate. It's not a rebrand or anything like that, so we're not changing our name. It's more of an internal change than anything else. It'll give us the sort of ability to offer the UK a force ready to deploy around the globe immediately on numerous different tasks with specialist groups consistently forward deployed and others working as part of a much larger and modern global task force. All of this just will allow us to work with sort of more autonomy and everyone will have specialist skills to make them more employable and useful on the battlefield.
Okay, now this might be an obvious question to you, but for anybody who doesn't know, what's the difference between SAS, Special Boat Service, and Special Forces? Is there a difference?
Yeah, so I mean, sort of to everybody watching, they're all sort of very, very similar. They're all part of the UKSF group, UK Special Forces, who are clearly the UK's force that conduct operations that have a specialist nature or that can't be sort of completed or conducted by a conventional force. They work under slightly different direction and rules to the rest of the military, but clearly heavily supported by all the other forces for numerous things. But yeah, they all sort of fall under the same sort of umbrella of UKSF.
Okay, and in your opinion, how do you feel that the Royal Marines compare to other elite forces across the world?
I mean, obviously I'm slightly biased in this, but I've worked with forces from all over NATO through to some Eastern European countries, and obviously worked with the US quite a lot actually, and we always seem to be famous in their eyes for our immensely long sort of arduous training, which I'm sure people already know about, but also just sort of very well respected for performance in recent campaigns. As I say, I've worked with the US Marines a lot, and there's a misconception that the US Marines are very sort of gung-ho and quite trigger happy, but they always sort of say to us guys that whenever they're deployed and they hear that there's a Royal Marine unit nearby or the quick reaction force for that period of time are Royal Marines, it sort of gives them the warm and fuzzy that they're in capable hands, and it's just quite well respected for basically our history and our training, and that's what we obviously aim to continue to provide for the rest of the sort of the world, really.
Love that. And how easy is it to progress through the ranks? If you want to move on up, what's the process like? Yeah,
so I mean, I wouldn't say it's easy. Everything is essentially merit-based promotion, which means that you've got to work for it. You don't just actually get promoted because you've been in the Marines for 5 years, for example. It's not time-based. There's clearly a filter process before people sign up, before they join, and then another filter process throughout recruit training. And then obviously that sort of continues as you get through the ranks. So you just continuously need to be employing all those attributes of sort of commando spirit and values, which I mentioned earlier, to make sure that you promote through the ranks. That's kind of a complicated way of viewing it, but essentially you work hard, you reap the benefits, and once you've got that required experience, which brings obviously knowledge as well, it's just a natural step. So yeah, that's the sort of the natural way to promote through.
And I can imagine a lot of people will be wondering how this sort of lifestyle affects your personal life and your social life.
Yeah, so I mean, when I joined training, all of my friends were sort of in the first year at university, and at times when I was obviously up late at night doing various bits of admin, as we call it, ironing, whatever else, sorting things out, I would often think, oh, all my friends are at uni now, on a Wednesday night, and they're all out drinking and stuff like that. But there's certainly opportunity for that, especially, I mean, when you're in training, it's sort of that cohesion that you get with your peers at the time. And then obviously when you pass out and you go to a unit and you go on overseas exercises, or you go on adventurous training, there's certainly time for stand down. Last year I went to California skydiving for 2.5 weeks. Got a weekend in San Diego in the middle and got a weekend in Vegas at the end. So, there's so much opportunity And so many sort of times you can, if you're out in the US, for example, on a 6-week exercise, there's opportunity to potentially book yourself a flight back 2 weeks later and just sort of have your 2 weeks leave out there. And obviously you've got that for free. So yeah, there's all sorts of opportunity, and it does change your life massively, obviously, but certainly for the better in most respects.
So a lot of people might not know that the RN is actually in the Times top 50 employers for women. Is there any different training that women have to undergo? Is it the same for men and women? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So obviously women can join the Royal Marines now, which is something recent in the last few years. But no, there's no differences whatsoever. Women and men are expected to train alongside each other, pass the same tests physically, mentally, everything else, other than the obvious sort of basics like having separate toilets and things like that. No, everybody gets treated the same, and that's the way it should be, really, to just make sure that everybody, once they earn their commando flashes and their green beret, are at the exact same required standard to then deploy in operations around the world.
And there's a few women in training right now, aren't there? Yeah,
there are. None have passed yet, but certainly some are very much on the way to doing so, which will be pretty exciting to obviously to have that different dynamic when on the battlefield, which is certainly something that people tend to overlook, but offers us a completely different way of communicating, particularly with specific cultures around the world.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So what are the different areas that you can specialise in within the Royal Marines?
Yeah, so this is all sort of changing around a little bit now with the whole Future Commando Force thing. But essentially, it's a huge amount of areas. I mean, previously there was 27 different specialisations that Royal Marines could specialise in. But essentially, the way it's going to work now, so as a Marine, when you're at the rank of a Marine, you can become more proficient in a number of specialist areas to make you more employable as a combat operator. So these are going to be known as SSQs, so secondary specialist qualifications. So for example, as a Marine, once you've passed out of recruit training and headed to your commando unit, you could then go and do a combat assault breacher course, a combat medic course, a combat signaller, and a combat boarding operator, for example, which would clearly make you super efficient in all those areas, and essentially just make you a better all-round soldier and commando, which is exactly what we want. Clearly, you pass out of recruit training as a commando, good to go, but those qualifications in those specialist areas will just make you mega proficient in each of those roles. So they're sort of, obviously that's just a few of them. There are far more secondary specializations that people can do. And then we also have PSQs, so primary specialist qualifications, in which you would then become an absolute subject matter expert in that area, and then potentially promote through the ranks in that specialization. So for example, if you became a landing craft coxswain, that would be your primary SQ, and then you would then get more and more qualifications in that field to obviously sort of maintain experience and knowledge and everything else within that branch to make sure that we're operating as at the highest level possible.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about pay. I mean, obviously it depends on the role that you're doing, right? But can you tell us what the pay is actually like?
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. As you say, it depends on your role, your rank, your sort of time served, and obviously where you're currently based. I think obviously when guys and girls start recruit training, we're on around about £20,000 a year, obviously throughout training, and then that progresses on as they then pass out, and obviously year on year it increases, and as you promote through the ranks it increases and everything else. So that's just the actual sort of pay, the salary that you take home. I think one of the guys mentioned it earlier on is all the other benefits that you get. So yeah, it's massively, it's not bad essentially. Yeah, it's good.
Well, tell us about some of the other benefits. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so for example, pension's quite a big one. I actually got a letter about mine the other day. I'll be honest, I've not paid much notice to it. It's sort of my first 6-7 years in the Corps. But I got a letter the other day that essentially said, at the minute on my current salary, without me even knowing about it or noticing it, about £15,000 a year is being paid into my pension. Now, that's not sort of taken from my salary or anything. That's just sort of put in direct by the MOD, which is obviously something that's mega beneficial. Should you do sort of full time in the military, a very lucrative pension for when you leave. But I suppose most people watching this probably aren't overly concerned about the pension. So you've got all the other things, like obviously you get free healthcare and dental care and things like that. So I've recently had an injury on my ankle and seen a physio pretty much every week for the last sort of 6 months. So you can imagine how much that would cost as a civilian. Obviously, all military bases and camps have gyms, so you obviously don't pay for a gym membership. As I mentioned earlier, with the travel, so there's the opportunity for you to make it work for you, so you can take sort of holiday time and leave whilst you're out there, with obviously parts of travel paid for. Adventure training. So, for example, my trip to California probably was subsidised by about 75% last year, which obviously made it mega affordable for everybody that went out there, which is again something that's good. And then the obvious things like military discount from the companies that do it. And then the big one at the minute is probably the Forces Help to Buy scheme, which I think Josh mentioned. So essentially that allows you the ability to get up to 50% of your annual salary interest-free for, I think, 10 or maybe 15 years to obviously put towards a deposit for a house, which is something that's quite good as well. So yeah, there's so many. That's just a few things. There's so many things out there to help support you and your family as well. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, very good. And I mean, it sounds like such a full-on job. How much time do you actually get to spend at home? Do you get much time off?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. When I first started training, I was thinking, I'm never going to go home. I'm never going to see anybody ever again. But obviously, the first few weeks of training, you're in the zone, and it's designed to be like that to give you as few distractions as possible, if you like. And then obviously, as you progress through training, you start getting more weekends off, and obviously you get the leave, annual leave periods like Christmas, summer, or Easter, obviously. But then, yeah, once you pass out, clearly pretty much time's your own unless you're at work. Obviously, of an evening, things like that, and most weekends are off unless you're obviously on exercise or you're deployed. You get 7 weeks of paid leave per year. Which is obviously pretty good, and all your bank holidays, things like that. So yeah, you actually do end up having quite a lot of time off. And obviously, if you go away for 6-8 months on deployment or operations or whatever, you will then get what we call POTL, post-operational tour leave, at the end, which sometimes is sort of 8, 10, 12 weeks long. So yeah, certainly opportunity to get both home and obviously to go and travel and see places in your own time as well on holiday, which is certainly something I'm hitting the most of.
Okay, yeah, for sure. And where do you see life for you beyond the Marines, and what sort of skills are you going to take with you moving forward?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, sort of life beyond the Royal Marines, I don't know. How long I'll stay in, again, I'm not entirely sure. I'll probably end up doing my full career in the Royal Marines, just because a guy that I know that was ex-military once told me, as soon as you stop enjoying it, that's your time to leave, and I still love it. So I'm certainly not in that bracket yet. With regards to skills, I think I couldn't really put a number to it or a sort of a sentence together to include them. But for me, it's probably the confidence, and clearly being a Royal Marine officer, command and leadership and management and everything like that is just sort of second to none in comparison to most people I know, and just clearly a vast amount of military skills which aren't necessarily employable in civilian life, but certainly give you the edge over somebody else. And then clearly there's so many opportunities to gain qualifications that transfer over to civilian life, such as obviously the driving quals, boating quals, yacht master, things like that. Different range qualifications, instructor qualifications, and then obviously everything in between, sort of like educational. So, for example, doing a degree, getting qualifications in a whole host of things. And then you actually get given financial grants towards the end of your career or when you're leaving, depending on how much time you've served, to then retrain. So, for example, if I left in a few years, I would then have 3 years worth of training allocated to me, where I could get £2,000 a year from the Royal Marines to put towards training. So yeah, they certainly look after you both whilst you're in, and obviously try and make sure they set you up for success before you leave as well, which is obviously something that's pretty positive.
Yeah, nice. Well, listen, Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your story. And Joe and Josh have been amazing as well. I think everybody at home watching would have got a lot out of everything that you've said. So we appreciate it. And before we go, can you just tell us what advice you would give to anybody who's watching, who's umming and ahhing, they don't know if they want to join or not? What would you say to them?
So I often sort of give this at the end of when we do specific recruitment events. My advice is, if you are thinking about it, you've clearly got something in your mind that makes you want to do it. And the fact that you're watching this means that the Royal Marines certainly interests you. And I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I would suggest it's the best force, certainly in the UK, to join from being a civilian. So my biggest piece of advice is just get your application in. Putting your application in isn't you signing your life away, absolutely signing the dotted line to say I'm in the Royal Marines for the next 20 years of my life. There's nothing I can do about it. But obviously getting your application in earlier, the ball is then in your court to get everything done. And it's certainly the best option. Get your application in early and just go for it. And, it's something you certainly won't regret. And if you're, like I say, if you're watching this and you've got that urge and you want to scratch that itch, then the Royal Marines is definitely the place for you to be. So yeah, that's probably my best piece of advice.
There we go. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Big thank you to Ryan there. And that is all we've got time for this evening, but we hope this has given you a bit of a taste as to what it is like to be a Royal Marine Commando. And you can take the next step right now with the Find Out More link on your screen, which will take you to the website. And now it is your chance to drill down if you want to talk to the team and find out more, whether you want to hear more about their experiences, the training, whatever you like, throw it all at them. They are ready, and they're going to be staying online to answer your questions. A massive shout out to everybody in the Royal Marines and the Royal Marines Reserve today for giving us a peek into their lives. And thank you so much for watching. Good luck, everybody. See you later.